Welcome to Authentic Influence Podcast, and this is Anthony Chancellor from Simple Creative Marketing. It is 6:30 a.m. here, and I don't usually get up this early for anyone, but for this gentleman, I'm making an exception. This is my good friend Nick Loper from Side Hustle Nation. We are talking about how to grow your podcast audience and launch a book. Two things that Nick has done really, really well. Nick Loper helps people earn money outside of their day job. He's an author, an online entrepreneur, and host of the award-winning Side Hustle Show podcast, which features new part-time business ideas each week. As Chief Side Hustler, love that, at sidehustlenation.com. He loves deconstructing the tactics and strategies behind building extra income streams. And his new book, which has just been launched, I think, or last month, is called $1,000 100 Ways. You can grab that on Kindle and all the different sites, but the main site you can check out is 1k100ways.com. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for getting up early. We'll wake you up. Hopefully, you got your coffee going, and we'll get into it.
Absolutely, and I'm gonna have to find some MCP oil and do what you do just to get some.
I've got mine. It's still it's only 11:30 over here, so I'm still working on mine.
Fantastic. Now, just for the listeners here, where are you dialing in from?
From Seattle, Washington.
Seattle. Okay, so I have actually had the pleasure of being in Seattle for 3 days. I think when I did my road trip, I went from Toronto, Canada, to from east to west. Not really east, but anyway, we went on a sort of 8 days on an RV with 5 strangers in an RV van across to Vancouver, hitchhiked down to Seattle.
What a cool adventure!
I know. I was on my way to Burning Man actually, but I never got there. I ended up detouring and going to LA because my cousin who lives and grew up in LA said, "Hey, you're over this part of the world. Why don't you come say hello to the family?" And I did. So that's what happened. So tell us about, apart from the alleged rain that goes on in Seattle, why have you chosen to live in Seattle?
Yeah, so we actually just moved here a couple months ago. This is where my wife and I grew up, and growing up here, you don't notice the rain. You're just like, that's just how it is, and you don't know it until you go somewhere else and then come back. And you're like, well, why is everything always wet all the time? We spent the last 14, 15 years in Northern California, and we wanted to get closer to family. We wanted to get our kids set up. Our oldest just started kindergarten, get him set up in the school district, and now was the time to make the move. So it was much harder leading up to the decision. Like all of that mental gymnastics was much more difficult than it's been post landing. It's only been a couple months, but it feels like the new normal. So we're happy with that so far.
Fantastic. And just relative to other cities in or where you came from, how's housing and the pricing and that kind of the market over there?
It used to be a slight advantage cost of living wise. It's similar real estate to where we were in California, right. But no state income tax. So there's a little bit of an advantage there of some, actually, on an annual basis, thousands and thousands of dollars back to the bottom line.
Yeah. That's fantastic. One tip I do know, one thing I did learn when I was over there was just per capita, I think Seattle has the largest amount of cafes, like in a city, across the globe, like that place.
I believe it.
Starbucks, but also beyond that, there's tons of other much better coffee places. And the one favorite building I have for that city is the Seattle Public Library. That building and its construction is it's an amazing place to walk into. Even from the outside, right? Like yeah. Now that we've digressed, let's get into the topic. How to grow your podcast audience. So let's start with that and a bit of background around your story. When did you launch your podcast, and how many episodes are you in, and what's the let's talk about the growth of that podcast.
Yeah, so I started the Side Hustle Show in 2013. And so I've been at it for 8 years, almost 9 years, and it is closing in on 500 episodes. And I want to point out that it felt crowded in 2013. There were already, dozens of entrepreneurial interview shows out there. John Lee Dumas was rocking, Mixergy was rocking, David Siteman Garland was rocking. Like it was a format that had been done. And so it was kind of like, well, what unique angle could I really add to this game? And so in my case, it was like, okay, I'm going to niche down and do side hustle stuff because that's what I was interested in. That was my story. That's how I, got out of my corporate job. It was, through a side hustle. It's like, okay, I could spread this gospel through interviewing other people who've been there, done that as well. It is interesting. Podcasting is an interesting space because I think it's much more competitive now, obviously, than it was 8 years ago, but there's still a huge market share left to conquest. I think the latest stat was like 50% of the population has ever listened to a podcast or something. So there's like this whole realm of possibility of people who have yet to discover the glory of on-demand audio on whatever topic they want. So I think there's still lots of room to grow in the podcast space. The biggest difference is the influx of big money and big media in a lot of ways, where in 2013, you didn't see a ton of ESPN podcasts. You didn't see a ton of celebrity podcasts where they're bringing their existing audience into the fold. You didn't see the New York Times. You didn't see as much NPR. And all those people have helped grow the listenership, grow the pie. But it just means you're not going to be able to compete necessarily, with the, a production staff of 14 people where they have, maybe an hour of labor hours into every audio minute that gets aired. It's like, I can't compete with that. So I got to come up with something compelling. And in my case, hopefully it's the content. And so that's kind of what I've been doubling down on and trying to grow the show, coming up with compelling stories that people can't help but share.
And there's a couple of things I want to sort of zero in on what you've just said there. One is around just identifying, well, how can I be different? When there are already somewhat successful podcasts, in my space. Entrepreneurship obviously and business is a big topic. But literally, if we go into Apple, podcast or Spotify or whatever it may be, and search business or even side hustles. If we even search side hustles, but there's not just yours podcast anymore. Like literally,
Right.
there's a whole bunch of them now. But like you say, there is opportunity for growth, and the market is still catching up. Like it's not the number one. I think TV is still killing it. Like in terms of media streams and what we watch.
Sure.
Even though there is the growth of Netflix and other things are going on with streaming services. But you also talked about just consistency, like to get to 500 plus episodes, you really stand out. Like there's enough of interesting different ideas that you can bring onto every episode. You're starting to do some really cool things with like recap episodes or summaries of topics, of groups of topics and categories, and you're doing these sort of things that sort of where you speak back to, hey, on episode 10 I interviewed this person, and some of those strategies. Can you talk about just if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, all right, it sounds like it's probably still a good idea to launch a podcast in 2022. What would you sort of suggest or advise in terms of, I think you call it the listener pyramid. How do you climb the listener pyramid, and how do you get more listeners for a podcast?
Yeah, so you gotta commit to it. And early on, I was like, "Am I going to run out of people to talk to? Am I going to run out of ideas here?" But every day in my inbox, there's more episode ideas than there are weeks to fill those. So it's like, okay, the well doesn't necessarily run dry. But climbing the listener pyramid, it's something that I've thought about in terms of growing the audience. And so if you imagine this pyramid with 4 layers, you have strangers at the bottom. This is like the biggest problem for podcasters and pretty much any business. It's this awareness problem. Like if people would just know that I exist, like that would be a great win. From there it goes to listeners. From there it goes to subscribers. And at the very top of the pyramid, you have fans. Fans are the people who listen to every episode. They spread the word for you. They tell all their friends about you. They buy all your products when you have something for sale. Those are the people that you ultimately want. And so every action that you take as it relates to your show should be about ascending people on that ladder. And so if we start at the bottom with this stranger problem, like how do we address the fact that nobody knows who we are? There is this listenership hurdle when it comes to podcasting, in that it's not as seamless as clicking play on a YouTube video. It's not as seamless as clicking a link and scrolling through a blog post. So you have to kind of overcome that. You have to make the hook so compelling that people are willing to go find the podcast app, search for your show, find the specific episode you're talking about. Like, it's got to be that good that they're willing to go through those hoops. And so that happens in a couple different ways. It happens, number one, if a friend tells them about it, right? So I think shows tend to spread word of mouth. So make it so compelling, people, can't help but share. And I always give the example of like Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. It's like, this guy is just an incredible storyteller. I don't know if anybody else has like 18 hours to geek out on World War II in the Pacific, like I did over the last few months, but it's like, it's fantastic. Like, it's so good. And that's what he's going for. Like, it's too good not to share. Who follows none of the conventional rules about podcasting. He puts out an episode whenever he wants. The conventional wisdom says you got to publish every week or every day. The conventional wisdom says, it's got to be between 25 minutes and an hour, because that's like the length of somebody's commute. His episodes are like 3-4 hours long. It's
Wow.
like, if it's good enough, there's no such thing as too long, only too boring, is what another podcaster told me. So I like that one. And then the other way I try and address that hurdle is like with the title of the episode, and trying to make that something that invokes curiosity. Usually I try and do that with like a dollar amount in a specific period of time, like, oh, how this person grew from 0 to 20 grand a month in a year and a half, or something crazy. And like, or, one of the very early episodes of the podcast was like how this one guy earned enough money on Fiverr to buy a house in his first year. And I was like, wait a minute, what could you possibly sell him for $5 that, you earn that money? It's like, Nick, it's all about the upsells. And it was like, it was cool. And so I'm trying to embrace that with the titles of the episodes, because I've been a guest on other shows, and to your credit, you led with the hook here. You're going to, hey, we're going to talk about growing a podcast audience. We're going to talk about book marketing. We're going to talk about, Facebook as a discovery channel, like all of these like specific things people want to learn about. Because I've been a guest on other shows, and they do what you're supposed to do. And they say, hey, Nick, thanks so much for joining me. Your episode is live today. And, here's the link to check it out if you want to share. And you click on it and it says, episode 33, Nick Loper. And you're like, I feel like you missed an opportunity here, because it's like nobody knows who I am. Nobody cares. Like, what's in it for me? What's in it for the listener? What's the hook, the transformation? What are they going to get in exchange for, trading their time with you in their earbuds? It's kind of how I think about the discovery problem. And of course, guesting on other shows, like getting the word out, telling people what you do, inviting people to tune in. Early on, I had an email list of 11 people going back to 2013. And it was, but I did have, and what most people have is an existing network of Facebook friends, LinkedIn connections, email, contact history. And so I went through line by line, like, or letter by letter in Gmail, and saying like what would pop up in the compose window and like auto suggest when I typed in a letter, and be like, oh, Aaron, haven't emailed Aaron in a while. Let's see. Hey, Aaron, what are you up to? I just launched this new project. Here's the link to check it out. Just like trying to, and we find this with a lot of businesses on the side hustle shows, like starting with your existing network to get the ball rolling, hopefully send some positive signals to the algorithms, and start to get outside of your own sphere of influence in that way.
So that's how a couple of things there, which are really cool. I like the idea of starting with a compelling hook. I mean, that's a copywriting technique. Certainly, as a copywriter, I learned that a long time ago. But we see that. I mean, if we watch just how they name episodes on TV series and on on movies, like the movie titles or even subtitles, even books, right? We look at books. The title has to grab us, so we're sort of thinking, okay, what's the one thing that's coming from that conversation or that particular episode that's gonna, and I think of it as their individual, like they are individual episodes, and treat them as such, and not that they're you can't assume that you have that loyal listener that's been listening for all your episodes and they know who you are and they know who your guests are. And so if you kind of go, okay, well, what's going to grab them, and even if they have listened to your episodes before, what's going to bring them back?
And even even Tim Ferriss does this, who's talking with celebrity guests, where he could probably get away with, calling his episode, number 400 Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's like, but no, he leads with what did they talk about, right? And so it makes it a little more compelling. And so unless you're just interviewing total celebrities that everybody's going to know, it's like a conversation with Oprah or something. Like, okay, I'll tune in. But other than that, it's like, okay, what's in it for me as the listener? Do you want to go to the next tier on the pyramid?
Yes. So we've started off at the bottom of the pyramid, which are the strangers, and now we're moving on to the next tier. Let's talk about that one, Nick.
Yeah, so we've hopefully compelled these strangers to tune into us, give us a chance, put us in our earbuds. And so I think that means, as you start to construct your episodes, it means being respectful of people's time, like getting to the point quickly. I don't know if you've ever listened to other shows where there's like this 5-10 minute preamble with like maybe there's a co-host and they're just like joking amongst themselves, or they're just I don't know, that you're not delivering what you said you were going to in the title of the episode. And so like you're trying to get to the point quickly to make sure that listener actually listens to the thing, like that they get a chance to consume your hopefully compelling, shareable, interesting, life-changing content from that episode. From listeners to subscribers, like how do you get somebody who just tuned in once, maybe they tuned in twice, to like listen to you consistently? Or how do you get them on your email list? So what worked for me was recognizing that the podcast is not a business in itself, but it can be a content marketing arm for the business. And so for me, that shift was creating episode specific lead magnets. And what I did early on was say, hey, you're out walking the dog, you're at the gym, you're driving in your car, you're not in a great place to take notes. Don't worry, we did it for you. If you hit up sidehustlenation.com/episode number or whatever, you'll be able to download those. They're totally free. That was a big inflection point for me. So this was embarrassingly, it took me over a year to kind of figure this out. But I was 14 months into the show, 60 something episodes, and had built an email list of like 1,000 subscribers at that time, which was like, this is, 1,000 people are going to let me into their inbox. Like, that's pretty cool. But within 3 months of turning this on, it was 3,000. Within 6 months, it was 6,000. A year later, it was 12,000. There's this big ramp up. And now you have and the ability to communicate with what was previously a mostly anonymous audience. Podcast analytics, notoriously bad, right? So you now have the chance to get into somebody's inbox, tell them about your latest episode, tell them about your products and services in an easily clickable way. They've got something they can easily forward to friends and family. I think that was a big turning point for me.
You talked about just show notes and actually offering those as an incentive or a reason for people to come and sign up, for your email list. Can you sort of give some tips around how to do those without killing yourself? Because listening back over if you imagine the person who's doing a 3-hour episode to go through that and listen and pull out sort of the insights, or even just for a 30-minute conversation, how have you found a sort of an effective way or efficient way to do that?
Yeah, so today I get everything transcribed through Otter.ai, I want to say. Otter is it's like $10 a month for these AI transcriptions that end up being pretty accurate. So that gives the writer who's been on my team for probably the last 6 years, he's been there forever. He uses those along with my notes to kind of craft the summary outline, or at least he did back in the day. We've shifted to publishing that summary as a blog post, full show notes, sometimes 2,000 words, here's everything that we covered. Here's the guest top tips. Because I started to see diminishing returns on using that as a lead magnet. And I was like, yeah, for user experience, probably better just to put that stuff up front and let people consume how they want to consume. So I've been trying to come up with, in the last year and a half, of other complementary lead magnets that would be helpful for somebody who just listened to this episode. So we did an episode on this guy who was renting out portable hot tubs, like one of my favorite episodes of the year as a side hustle, high school teacher in New York. He's like, yeah, I got these portable hot tubs, here I buy them for this much, I rent them for this much. So the lead magnet was, well, here's a bunch of other unconventional things you could rent out for a profit. I was trained to think rental business equals rental property, real estate, houses, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like there's there's bounce houses and hot tubs and semi truck trailers and all sorts of random stuff that people are renting out. And so putting that together as a lead magnet and, trying to transition to that instead, and not every episode anymore, but including those where it makes sense. So like today's episode was a woman who had built this like belly dancing course, online business, teaching belly dancing and like, click funnels and the one-time offer and the bump, all this stuff and driving cold traffic. And so we put together the funnel worksheet. Like if you're trying to sort out, okay, what could be your primary offer? What could be your one-time offer on the thank you page? What could be your order bump? Like all these different tiers of the thing, or what could be your lead magnet if you're going to do a lead magnet funnel. And so trying to put that together, like what would be a helpful complementary resource for the listener?
I really like that. And I wondered if your complementary lead magnet was some 100 ways to sell your to move your body and make money or something like that. I'm not going to go there, but anyway, I'm going to have to listen to that episode. That's a fun one. That's one of the things that actually stood out to me from the book, and we'll get to the book in a moment. But just the book covers 100 different ways to actually that different guests you've had on the show talk about how they're making income at least $1,000 a month through side hustles, and it's really fascinating. Like some of those ideas that I'd never would have thought of. Like they were just like you said. We're familiar with things like Airbnb, but to extend that, I've seen someone dropped a flyer in my mailbox this week, which was kind of like if you got a car parking space that you could rent out, and we'll get you vehicles and renters, and I was like, oh, that's pretty smart, and they're doing the old let's test the market, drop flyers in everyone's mailboxes and see who's going to buy it, because they're building the platform, right? Like that's what they're doing. So really, really interesting.
We had a guy who was doing flyer delivery as his side hustle. He's like, he was like addicted to his Fitbit, and he's like, how do I get more steps? And I'm like, so I wanted to do all this walking anyways. How could I get paid for it? Well, he started knocking on local businesses, stores, and like, yeah, you want to pass out flyers for us? Knock yourself out. We'll give you 15 cents a house or something. So he's like, the real secret sauce was when I, found out I could, deliver 3 or 4 flyers at the same time. I just, tripled my hourly rate. So it's like all sorts of fun ideas.
It's amazing. 1k100ways.com. That's where you can go check out the book. Nick, we just talked about the listener pyramid. We've got 2 subscribers. Then the final layer is fans. How do we go from subscribers to fans?
Yeah, this is going to vary depending on the niche of your podcast. But for me, this is usually when someone ascends to like fandom in the pyramid is when they have taken action, they have seen some positive results as a result of some of your content. They have implemented something, they tried it out. They're like, hey, I got a customer, or hey, I increased my affiliate earnings, or hey, I made my first sale. Like all of that stuff is like, hey, this stuff works. All of a sudden, it is not just ideas in my head, but it's actual real dollars in my wallet. And that's kind of when, at least in my case, the things start to spin really positively. But I'm thinking of other shows that I'm a fan of. It's often the same way, where it has some sort of practical application. And I'm trying to think of because I listen to the hardcore history stuff where it's like, okay, I'm a fan, but I'm not necessarily applying the stuff. I mean, it certainly makes me grateful to have not had to fight in these horrific conditions and these wars and stuff. But it's, that's why I say it's going to vary depending on your niche.
Now, one of the things that you've, at some point you decided to launch a Facebook group to coincide with or to parallel with the podcast episodes that you're putting out. So can you talk about this, why you went that route, and is it because you saw other sort of podcast hosts doing similar things, or and now it's gotten to the point where you really advocate for using Facebook as a discovery channel? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, the group has really taken on a life of its own. The group started probably early 2015. I was hesitant to start it early on because I was worried about, the time, effort, energy, headache that it would take to moderate. I was worried that, similar like mindset issues, like, what does the world really need another, entrepreneurial Facebook group? I surveyed the audience through email. They said, yeah, we'd join, that sounds cool. It's like, okay, let's test this out. Since then, it has grown to over 45,000 members and has become, it started out very much as like listeners of the show, subscribers to the email list, like here's a place to come hang out. And instead of being one to many, me broadcasting on the blog, podcast, email, all of a sudden it was many to many, with me at the hub, which I thought was a really cool place to be. Like listeners could have conversations with other listeners. They could ask and answer questions, sometimes without even my direct involvement. We've seen mastermind groups form in there. We've seen business relationships form in there, other partnerships. It's really cool to see, and I kind of have been the conduit of that. In the past year or two, I've started to recognize that a lot of people are coming in not from this existing ecosystem, not from the podcast, not from the existing blog or email list. They're getting shown this group through Facebook, either as a recommended group, like, hey, you're already in these other similar groups, you might check this one out, or through Facebook search, which is one of the top 5 search engines in the country. And it says, people are using that search bar on Facebook, which is, it's really interesting to me because I, very rarely use Facebook in that way. But if somebody is typing in your primary keyword, you want to be found, right? So I want to own the side hustle keyword in every search engine. And Facebook was another way to do that. So actually, had kind of obscured the name of the group in its early days for,
I remember that.
It was SH Nation for a long time, because I was like, well, what if people, again, mindset issues, well, people probably don't want to join a side hustle Facebook group, because like, what if they're Facebook friends with their boss or their coworkers or something? Like, it's like, okay, who cares? So eventually changed the name and started getting this big influx of people who, were discovering the group through search. What has been a big win this year is I never had a great system for, introducing those people into the fold. Like, yeah, there's this cool group, there's this cool community, but like, did you know there's this whole other body of content and resources, beyond that through the blog and podcast? And never had a really good system for that, but started using a software called Group Leads this year to collect emails when people request to sign up. So it's one of the 3 questions that I ask when somebody requests to join. It says like, hey, do you have a side hustle? If so, tell me about it. What do you, I probably ask like, what are you struggling with or something? And then, if you want my best side hustle tips in your inbox, punch in your email here. And it's not a requirement to join the group, but surprisingly enough, or positively enough, a lot of people do punch that in, and then Group Leads sends that directly over to ActiveCampaign in my case.
And then when they arrive there, do you have some kind of segmentation set up when they subscribe?
Yeah. So now there's a welcome sequence that says, okay, here's, some of my best side hustle tips. Here's how to get started. If you don't have anything going already, you're trying to encourage people to reply, like all the basic welcome sequence stuff. And actually on my project list is to really expand that welcome sequence and build it out for, it could be 6 months long. It could be 12 months long. It could highlight some of the best, the greatest hits from the archives, right? Because if you're just coming in and you're now on the newsletter and you're getting, the new stuff every week, but it's like, hey, there's 8 years of this stuff. Like, you ought to go back and check out this episode, like, and let people kind of choose their own adventure in that way.
That's really cool. Because I think there's a lot of you're getting so many signups per month or whatever it is, and I think there's a really great opportunity to allow people to go deeper into what it is they're there for. Because there'll be, I would think there's people who are interested in different category of side hustle, right? So like for me, I'm all about the agency and growing a content service or an affiliate sort of program, but then there's going to be others who want the door-to-door walking around the neighborhood doing those sort of things, and how do I do that better, right? There's
I just got a good one. I just got off the phone with Georgia Austin. Have you heard about this
No.
gal on Fiverr? She's putting up like 60, 70, 80, 90 grand months on Fiverr, and now transitioning to her own agency. She's got this team of writers. Like, she's done really well after only like, really digging into it in the last 9 months. It's been insane.
She's the one that had, there was a video on YouTube. She was profiled by Fiverr or something. I think I saw a video of someone doing that. Anyway, gonna definitely have to check that one out. Just whilst a note on my mind, whilst we're talking about sort of email sequences, tinylittlebusinesses.com. I'm not sure if you've come across Andre Chaperone before, but he had a course which has been sort of like it's like the #1 for email marketing. For a lot of popular email marketers and online business owners would be familiar with his work. It used to be called escapes me now, but it's been renamed to the Art of Email this year. And tinylittlebusinesses.com, I think you'd really like their approach to email marketing. And then they're like the people that you would know them, like even a Pat Flynn would have done their courses, like that's who they are. Okay, so let's come back to the Facebook group. One question I had for you around Facebook groups was, how do you optimize for search, knowing that Facebook could recommend the group to other people? There are other users. Are there certain things that you can do as the group owner to optimize for better results?
Yeah, I mean, you're an SEO guy in the traditional sense, so you're going to be pleasantly surprised to learn that the Facebook algorithm is super, super basic when it comes to search. Like put your primary keyword in the name of the group. Like that is the extent of the Facebook SEO knowledge that I have. So my friend of mine runs, that's why the group is Side Hustle Nation. Somebody search Side Hustle, they're going to find it. A friend of mine runs a group called Virtual Assistant Savvies or VA Savvies or something. So somebody types virtual assistant, they're going to find a group. She just passed 80,000 members. Another guest on the podcast runs a group about becoming a microgreens farmer as a business opportunity. And so his group is microgreens farmer or something. So somebody searches microgreens, they're going to find his group. That's top of the funnel for him.
So basically just keep it simple and put the words that you think people are going to search for in the name of the group. Do you do anything with the description? Like when people find Side Hustle Nation or whatever, and they go, okay, well, that's what's the description comes up. Do you sort of put anything in there?
I updated the description to say, like, this is the official community of sidehustlenation.com, because I found that there were other groups using that same name, using the Side Hustle Nation name. And so I was like, okay, I wanted to make sure, like, if people are looking, I mean, they're going to see one with, 45,000 members or one with 2,000 or whatever. But, just want to make sure, like, hey, this is the official, this is legit, this is the one you're looking for. Come on in.
Yeah, you're at the point where you get the copycat groups coming up. Good problem to have. And in terms of the group itself, I'm an active member in there, and it's just the engagement is off the charts. Like I see a lot of people, posting things, and you do, I think, a weekly like wins post. What have you found to work over the years, and I guess what's working now that maybe didn't work before in terms of engagement?
Yeah, the wins stuff doesn't work as well as it has in the past. I mean, the algorithm loves to see engagement, getting people to like and comment. So if you can ask questions, if you can get people to comment, and it's so annoying because it's like, come on, Facebook, don't make people play these games, because I hate seeing posts of like, hey, I just made this killer resource. Drop me a hands up emoji if you want it. And it's like, this is just, I don't know, this is just garbage. Like, it's just not worth it. This is like, just post the thing. Like, if that's what you want to do, just post the thing. But if you do, and it's a link, that Facebook doesn't show it to anybody. So like, you have to go back and forth. But kind of questions, like getting people's feedback on certain things, lists of side hustle ideas tend to work well for me. Cool resources that I'll try and find, especially like lists of resources, like, hey, here's the tools that I'm using in my business. If you can avoid putting a link, that's probably better. Put the link in the first comment or something if you must. But it's, I don't know. That's like the risk of Facebook is like, yes, there's a lot of eyeballs there. Yes, you can bring a lot of people into your fold, but it's still, you're kind of at the whim of different algorithms if they end up ever actually seeing your stuff.
Have you tried like direct running Facebook lives into there and those sort of things as a?
I've done a couple live videos, probably not in 3 or 4 years, but I like the comfort of the podcast. I can edit after the fact. It's like, it's a more comfortable space for me.
I feel yeah. That is a good point. You're kind of at the mercy at the algorithms of the platform. Now, how much time do you commit to actually being in the group? Because this is the one of the, I guess, reservations I've had in the past, and I know certain other people have. It's like, I don't really want to spend all that time in there, Nick. I don't want to be posting every day and responding to everyone's comments, and especially when you get to 50,000 members like that, that's a lot of management. Where are you at in terms of being the person doing all that work, and are you looking at bringing on volunteers, team members, and those sort of things? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm really grateful to have an awesome team of volunteer moderators that keep things really clean. I mean, with any group that size, you're going to be a spam target, and people trying to recruit people for their incredible business opportunity. Work from home, make 2,000 a month trading, foreign exchange, current. I don't know. We get all sorts of scam. I think the moderator team does an awesome job of cleaning that up. I've got my assistant now using group leads to approve new member requests. That was something that was taking a ton of time because it was because it's a browser extension. It's got to be done locally versus having your volunteer moderators. That seemed like a lot to request of them. Hey, could you install this thing? And could you double check that, all these different stipulations of like, somebody gets approved or not approved to join. So other than that, my time in the group has been reduced a little bit lately, but it is honestly my favorite place to come and hang out on Facebook. If it wasn't for the group, Facebook probably would have been deleted a long time ago, but it's, it's a really cool community to be a part of and see the connections and ideas that are being shared and happening in there.
That's awesome. And have you any plans to do like a local Seattle meetup for those who are in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, that was like probably the thing that I miss most from the pandemic is just like not being able to connect with people face to face. So I think that is definitely on the horizon as the world starts to look a little bit better. Knock on wood, because I would do it everywhere. We would travel. Like anytime there was a conference. I mean, we had meetups in all over the world. Like the first one was in Vietnam. I just put it out there. It's like, hey, we're going to be in Saigon. We're going to be in Ho Chi Minh City at this time. And somebody was like, dude, I'm local. Let's hang out. And so he like insisted on buying me a coffee. It's like, oh, this is great. But it's super cool to kind of recognize the impact that you're having, but also have face-to-face conversations with listeners and say, well, what are you working on? Oh, that's super cool. What are you struggling with? Maybe you can kind of help connect the dots for them. It's something I always get a lot of energy from. And so I'm very much looking forward to being able to do that again.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think there's an opportunity there to do like Side Hustle Nation, Southeast Asia, and kind of like what are the hustles that are happening in each region, right? Like there's certain things happening, even within countries, there's certain things that they can do that maybe they can't do Airbnb, but they're doing something else. And that's a really interesting way to go.
Nick, I met some cool guests. Cool guests through those meetups too.
Nick's World Tour coming up in 2023. Let's talk about the book. So you've launched. What number is this? You've got a number of books out there on Amazon. I can see. Where are we at? What was the motivation for this current book, which is $1,000, 100 ways.
Yeah, awkward title. I like registered the domain for this 1k100ways.com like early 2015. This was a project that just it took forever to get off the ground, but just couldn't get it out of my head. Like, okay, I need a way to showcase some of the cool stuff that members of the community are doing. It was, I don't know, depending on how you count, book number 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know. I just love publishing. I think it's cool as an income stream, although it is a small one for the sake of disclosure. I think it's cool for a discovery channel, right? Like if you want to own your keyword, right? Amazon is another one of those top 5 search engines where you want to try and own your keyword. So, if people search make extra money, if somebody searches side hustle, like I want to, if they search make money on the side, like those type of stuff, I want my work to show up there. And that's why it's a low price point, trying to reduce the friction, reduce the barrier to entry. But that's been kind of a fun little side hustle. On top is this little publishing arm of the business.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating to see just how you've attacked or tackled really it's one topic or one broad topic and then gone into here's 5 different books that came out of that particular topic. So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I've got that book that I want to launch 2022. What have you learned about the book writing and book publishing process that you wish you had known maybe 5 or 7 years ago?
Yeah. So first of all, align your expectations with reality. The book is probably not going to replace your day job. It's, consider any royalties that you earn as a nice bonus, but think about how readers of the book might be, a part of your broader ecosystem, or how Amazon could be part of your broader ecosystem, right? How do I, put my tentacles out into, all these different areas and bring people back to the email list, bring people back to the website. In the case of this book, and I guess other books in general, if you can have sort of a community that is behind you, that is vested in the process or progress of the book, I think that's helpful, because you'll see people posting oh, I just finished my rough draft, or I just finished my outline, or what do you think of these cover design concepts? All of that is genuinely trying to get feedback, right? But also trying to tease that this book is coming, let your followers know that there's this product and that you would really appreciate their support on it. I asked, I think in just a PS in one of my newsletters, hey, you want a free advanced copy, and you want to be on the launch team and leave a review early on in the launch. And that was a way to, reward the people who scrolled all the way to the bottom of the newsletter, and a way to, seed the listing on Amazon with some positive reviews. So a lot of people, what they do is they'll do the pre-order thing and say, hey, you're trying to stack up all these pre-orders. And even then when they go to launch, it's kind of like crickets, because it's well, there's no reviews, there's no feedback on this site yet, or there's no feedback on this book yet. And so I kind of like to, launch very quietly to a tiny segment of the list, or tiny segment of your audience. Maybe it's 10, 15, 20 people. Because you all have that many people who would probably be willing to support your work. And then that way you have got that social proof in place for when you do your public launch push. Tactically, I launched at 99 cents. If you have, any sort of audience, this is probably where I would position it as well. Just kind of because it's similar to podcasting, where it's okay, you're going to use your existing network to try and send positive signals to the Amazon algorithm in this case. And, hopefully that flywheel starts to spin and people start to discover the title organically, and you can get outside of your own network. Because it's okay, selling something for 99 cents and Amazon gives you a 35% royalty or something. So you make 30 cents, 35 cents on this book. You're
I'm rich.
Yeah. It's definitely a marketing exercise. Okay, I got to reach outside of my own sphere of influence to make this worthwhile, or just, play the volume game. Sure, if you're, going to hit the top of the bestseller charts, then that's fantastic. But it's also a little bit of an authority builder to say hey, I wrote the book on the topic. I know what I'm talking about. And I think that's something that definitely helps with getting, press and media down the road too. If you could say, hey, I'm the author of such and such title.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that there's a lot of energy put in, or a lot of conversation around, okay, how do you write the book? How do you self-publish the book? And I know you've done a few episodes about your journey through that on Side Hustle Nation. I'm curious about just marketing strategy, right? It's one of these things where I view a book, it's a product. And like any product, you got to have some kind of idea of how you're going to promote the product, right? Some people put it on Amazon and they expect miracles, but no, you're not gonna hit New York Times top 10 just because you put your book on Amazon. I think that there's a lot I think that you've done, and I've observed things that you do. Certainly you've got you've got your podcast audience and you've got your list, but even if we go back to basics and you didn't have all those things, what would you recommend someone do to start getting eyes onto this new book that's coming out?
Yeah, it's like any product, it's traffic and conversion, right? How do I get the traffic there, and how do I convert them to do the action that you want once you have them there? If you don't have a list, you could borrow other people's lists, which is something that I did in concert with my own launch efforts for this. So I'll get you the links afterwards. So you can kind of put it in the notes, but there's a handful of book marketing sites that have lists of readers that, have signed up to get notified of, daily discounted or free books. Right. And so, sometimes they're free to promote to, sometimes you pay a nominal fee to have your book included in that daily email blast. But again, it's like trying to reach a different audience, trying to send some nice signals to the algorithm. So that's one way that I would go about it. You could also do this with just other people in your space to say, hey, I don't have a big list myself, but I think this book would be compelling to your audience. You could send advanced review copies. Like, hey, if you don't trust me, I'd love to send you a copy. We talked to Matt Ralph in the children's publishing space, and he said he would go and find, influencers. He called them like micro influencers, which was like anybody less than 1 million followers. It's like, man, if you got 800,000 followers, it doesn't sound very micro to me, but okay. But he was like sending them books in exchange for a review, in exchange for promotion to their list if they liked it. And so that's another way to kind of get in front of other people's audiences at the time of the launch. After the launch is kind of where the rubber meets the road. It's like, well, I would love to make ongoing sales here. And still the same traffic and conversion applies. So like, could you add this into any autoresponder sequence that you have? Could you have this, featured on your website, in the sidebar, in the footer, in the about page, in your email signature? Could you consider running AMS ads, Amazon Marketing Services ads, which is something that I have done for all my titles and did for this one as well. But, after a month and a half or something, like the campaigns just weren't profitable. So I turned those off. I was like, okay, couldn't get that nut to crack on that one. It could be, talking about it on the podcast. It could be talking about it on other podcasts. It could be like, how do you drive continued interest to it? It could be relaunching. So I did this, probably a month after the initial launch, to the segment of people who had joined the email list since that time, and say, hey, they probably didn't get notified of the initial promotion for this thing. So like, hey, drop it down to 99 cents again for another day or two. Hey, limited time. Here's the promo. Here's the chance to get in, and just, trying to, because Amazon really likes to see consistent sales. So like trying to bump that up again in the ranks a little bit. And then for the production of the audiobook, it was another excuse to market the book again. Like finally got the audiobook narrated and approved, and got that thing uploaded. And Audible, or ACX, gives you like 50 promo codes to send out to get the book for free, like because they want, they know social proof sells, and they know you need reviews to have people, consider this book. So they're like, why don't you send out 50 of these codes to your audience, 25 for the US, 25 for the UK. And so I wasn't really sure what kind of response that was going to get, but I was pretty sure I could get more than 50 people to reply. And so I wanted to have like a consolation prize, almost like, sorry, I'm all out of codes, but if you want to check out the Kindle version, it's just 99 cents this week. So kind of priced it there. And so that was able to drive a bunch of sales last week, or Cyber Monday week, I guess that was, and got a lot of people to reply to the email too. So sending nice email algorithm, good vibes towards ActiveCampaign and in Gmail.
That's really cool. And I think you could even use, your launch as a case study for ActiveCampaign and go back to them and have them interviewing you and potentially getting some audience reach through their audience as well. And something like you talked about, what did you call it? Group leads, which is a Facebook group tool. I mean, you're the kind of advocate for them, and that's again another case study for them where you can get yourself onto their website, into their marketing and their funnel. So there's a lot of, one thing that really stands out for me in this conversation and just the work that you've done is how much you really understand and focus on the power of social proof. Like the just your show is entirely, here are stories of people doing cool things. And it's just case study, and then if we go through your email sequences, I'm sure you'll put stories in there too of here's how Bob made $10,000 doing this thing or whatever it may be, and then the book is a series of case studies. And I know you've got an article on the site, which is, let me just pull it up here, which is very similar title to the book, which is
Yes.
100 plus best side hustles to make $500 in your spare time. So what's the relationship here? Did you have this first and then thought, okay, well, maybe, let's do the book? And what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, this is one of the very first posts that I wrote for the site, and it's been updated, dozens of times over the last 8 years. This was just kind of uh, the pillar post strategy, which I kind of learned
Mm,
about after the fact or almost by accident. At a conference, I heard this called the Fishbone post strategy. Like if you're starting a new site, you would have like you know the 50 best or 50 most important survival skills or something, like if you're in the outdoor space, and then each one of those skills links out to the most authoritative resource that you can find on that topic. And then over time you aim to replace some of those external links with internal links as you build out your own library of content. And so that's kind of, this post is a really important discovery channel. Like as people Google side hustle ideas, they land on this, and hopefully they get down to the bottom. They got 8 or 10 different tabs open. They've discovered that, oh, there's a podcast that goes along with this site. There's, all this other interesting stuff here. So hopefully this, and the time on site, according to Google Analytics, is pretty strong for this page. So that's something that that I definitely like to try and do as an introduction to Side Hustlation and the content here. So this, as you can see, these are just like, quick paragraph examples of each one, versus the book is more a case study where everybody is following a similar format. How'd you come up with that idea? How'd you get your first customers? How else do you market this thing? How much are you making? How long did it take to reach $1,000 in profit? What mistakes did you have along the way? And so you can really kind of compare between different stories in that way.
Yeah, I really like just the layout of this. It's quite extensive. I mean, I'm not even halfway down a page yet. But it's really, like I say, you've built this over time, and and you probably have most of these as interviews now. And if not, you've got lots more to go, and you're getting a bunch of comments here, which is really, really, really cool. Love the strategy. I mean, we had Gert from SEO Leverage on the show previously, and he talked about content clusters, which is basically what this is. And this is just a really great example of putting that into practice. And like you say, it's really great for search engine traffic and bringing people to your site. So
can I tell you my biggest like accidental SEO win?
Yeah, sure.
So when I first wrote this post, the default title in WordPress was like 79-side-hustle-business-ideas or something. It was like this really long string. I was like, what if we just made it /ideas? Like, what if we just had this like really nice, clean, easy to say URL? And so whenever I would go on podcasts, it gave me an opportunity to be like, hey, you know what? Great place to start. No opt-in required. SideHustleNation.com/ideas. And I call that my big, accidental SEO win, because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. But now, having been a guest on a ton of different podcasts, and they're like, hey, Nick, where can people learn more about you? Like, this is a really easy to say URL. And I think it holds more value than just linking to your homepage, because now all of a sudden, people are, already into your content in a way. And so that's helped the ranking and revenue and discovery of this page, I think.
Absolutely. I think it's straight away I'm going, bam, I land on this page and it's just value. Like there's, you're not selling to me. Like it's really, I mean, you've got, a disclosure here about affiliate links, which is normal. But then to go, hey, like there's just great content. And then there's several opportunities to opt in here, to go subscribe to the podcast. To me, it's even a better landing page than sending someone to your homepage, because it is, so valuable. And I love the accidental discovery too, that sometimes that happens. It would have been a nightmare trying to give people the old URL. Oh my gosh. Nick, I wanted to say, let's wrap it up here. I wanted to say thank you for having you on the show. There's a ton of other things I want to talk to you about, and we'll have to bring you back next year at some point. But any last messages for our listeners?
Yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me on. It's always fun to geek out on this stuff. I mean, the big thing, whether in 2022 or beyond, it's kind of thinking of these asymmetric risk reward opportunities, something that has kind of been planted. This is side hustles in a nutshell, where like if you can keep your costs low, if you can keep your risks low, and you're starting something that has the potential to scale, has a potential for a big upside win, like it's only a matter of, yes, educating yourself on how the game is played, but taking enough swings, like getting yourself enough chances to find that thing that hits. So that's something that has been top of mind lately. Play the experimentation game, and manage your downside and take some swings.
Love it, love it. Now, I would be killed by my listeners if I don't ask you this final question, so I'm going to do it. Because it's become the one question they actually listen to. Like they're like, oh, I want that answer for every guest. And it's, what's one thing or a couple of things that you're doing for your own mental health?
Oh, mental health. That's a good question, man. I have become a much more consistent meditator this year. Have always struggled to develop this habit, and finally broke down and got one of these like Muse headband deals. I actually got it from got it for my wife as a Christmas present last year, and I'm the one who ends up using it a little bit more often. But that's something where it's like, okay, take a pause. Usually, it's like lately it's kind of been, mid early afternoon or like right before, kind of as the kids are going to bed, kind of like, okay, it's like downtime, quiet time. Like I know you're supposed to do it in the morning, but I want to get at it in the morning. Like I feel like. And that was always the struggle with meditation. It's like, there's other stuff I should be doing with this time rather than just sitting here and breathing. Come on. So trying to find some downtime in the day for that. And I find that reading, both fiction and nonfiction is kind of a good little reset for me. So reading stories, like I read one of my favorite books last year was the Lewis and Clark adventure. This was called Undaunted Courage, which was like a day-by-day journey through their expedition through the American West, which was like, let's go backpacking, let's go camping, except like, let's do it where the maps we have are pretty sketchy and then they run out, and let's do it for like 2 years and see what we can find. And it's like, oh man, it makes you so grateful to have Costco around the corner, to, have Amazon Prime. It's just like, oh man, the world that we live in. So trying to carve out some time for just for, where you're not thinking about work.
I love that, and both of those are fantastic ways to do it. Curious about Muse. Is that the one where it like if you reach a certain state, birds start singing, and like is that the one?
That's the idea. So that's what my wife and I describe it to each other. Okay, I'm gonna go do my birds, right? Let's try and get some birds. Like, I don't know if it does anything, but it is. I will say, like, if nothing else, like it's the placebo or it's the impetus of like, well, hey, you bought this thing, so you might as well go use it. Versus before, it was like really hard to prioritize making that meditation time. So I've done it much more this year. I think my best streak was 80 something days in a row.
Oh, wow.
But trying to get much more consistent with that as a result. And if it took buying a silly little device to make that happen, then it was worth it.
100% agree. Nick, thank you for joining us. Okay, for everyone listening, head over to sidehustlenation.com/ideas, and that's where you'll find that list of 100 different ideas for you to actually go and launch your own side hustle. If that's something that you would like to do, and an additional $1,000 a month, whatever it is, can do some good things for you. And we could probably do an episode about investment and what do you do once you start making some good money and putting money on the side. But we'll bring that to another episode.
Yeah, I would listen to that one.
All right, mate. Thanks for your time. And for everyone else listening, please, share your tweets and comments, whatever it is. You can find Nick. He's on Twitter at Loper, or is it at Nick Loper? Loper. That's right. And then join his group as well. So Side Hustle Nation, check it out on Facebook, and we'll see you there. Thanks again, Nick, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.